What if one of the greatest civilizations in human history is still lying beneath the waves, waiting to be discovered? For thousands of years, storytellers, scholars, and explorers have been haunted by the possibility that Atlantis, the fabled city described by Plato, was not just a myth, but a real empire swallowed by the sea in a single catastrophic night. Imagine it, vast temples gleaming in the sunlight, concentric canals cutting through a dazzling metropolis, and ships from every corner of the known world gathering in its harbours. Could all of that have existed, only to vanish forever beneath the ocean floor? From mysterious stone formations in the Bahamas to ancient maps that seem to depict coastlines long before modern cartography, the trail of clues is both fascinating and unsettling. Each artifact whispers the same tantalizing question. Was Atlantis a parable of human arrogance, or a lost chapter of history erased by nature itself? In this journey, you will travel from the writings of Plato to volcanic islands that may have inspired him, and from medieval maps to the latest satellite surveys of the deep sea. You'll weigh competing theories, myth, geology, archaeology, and in the end, you will be the one to decide, is Atlantis the greatest story ever told or the greatest discovery yet to come? But first, to answer that question, we must begin at the very beginning, with the man who gave Atlantis its name and the tale that has captured imaginations for over 2 millennia. Atlantis enters human history not through archaeology or ancient ruins, but through the writings of a single man, the philosopher Plato. Around 360 BCE, in 2 of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato recorded a story that he claimed came from Egyptian priests, passed down through the Athenian statesman Solon. The tale was vivid, dramatic, and unlike anything else in Greek literature. He described a mighty empire, larger than Libya and Asia combined, that flourished more than 9,000 years before his time. Atlantis, he said, was a powerful seafaring nation located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we today call the Strait of Gibraltar. The city itself was no ordinary settlement. In Plato's words, Atlantis was built in concentric rings of land and water, a dazzling combination of architecture and nature. Its kings ruled not just the city, but an empire that stretched across islands and reached deep into Europe and Africa. At the centre stood a magnificent temple to Poseidon, the god of the sea, decorated with precious metals and guarded by sacred bulls. It was, in every way, the picture of a civilization at the height of its power. And then came the downfall. According to Plato, Atlantis fell victim to its own arrogance. As the Atlanteans grew corrupt and greedy, the gods turned against them. In a single day and night of misfortune, earthquakes and floods swallowed the mighty empire beneath the ocean. What had once been the crown of civilization was erased so completely that only fragments of the story survived. Why does this matter? Because Plato was not a mere storyteller. He was one of the most influential thinkers in Western philosophy. His works shaped the foundations of politics, ethics, and metaphysics. For some, the fact that he wrote about Atlantis gave the story credibility. Was he drawing on genuine historical memory, or simply creating an allegory, a moral tale warning Athens about the dangers of hubris and imperial overreach? Over the centuries, the mystery has only deepened. Historians, explorers, and dreamers alike have asked the same question. Was Plato describing a real place, a symbolic lesson, or something in between? The allure lies in its scale and its rarity. Few myths describe a civilization so advanced, only to have it vanish in such a dramatic and total way. And that is why Atlantis has endured as one of humanity's greatest mysteries. But if we are to separate fact from fiction, we must map out the path ahead. How to move from myth to science, and from stories to possible evidence. Before diving into ruins, maps, and geological puzzles, it's important to understand the journey we're about to take. The mystery of Atlantis is not a straight line. It is a winding path that runs through philosophy, archaeology, folklore, and even modern satellite imagery. To truly explore it, we must travel across time and across disciplines, piecing together fragments from very different worlds. First, we will return to the myth itself, Plato's story. Was it just a moral lesson disguised as history, or could it have been inspired by older records, perhaps fragments of real events remembered through Egyptian archives or oral traditions? Next, we'll turn to archaeology and geology. Natural disasters have reshaped human civilization countless times. Entire cities have been buried under volcanic ash or swallowed by earthquakes. Could Plato's account of Atlantis be rooted in a memory of a catastrophe, such as the eruption of Thera on the island of Santorini, an event so violent it shattered a flourishing civilization overnight? Then, we will examine alternative evidence. Submerged stone formations, maps like the Piri Reis chart, and flood myths from across the globe. Do these scattered clues point to a shared human memory of lost lands and drowned empires? Or are they simply coincidences, our tendency to see patterns where none exist? Of course, no mystery is complete without skepticism. We'll explore why many scholars argue Atlantis is pure invention, why so much evidence fails under scrutiny, and why the story has been so often misused by pseudoscience and conspiracy. Finally, we will look at the larger picture. Even if Atlantis was never real, its significance endures. It shapes how we think about lost knowledge, human pride, and the possibility of civilizations rising and falling long before recorded history. And who knows, with the tools of modern oceanography, sonar mapping, and digital archaeology, the future may yet reveal surprises lurking under the deep. This is not a search for a single answer. It is a journey across competing ideas. By the end, you will be faced with the same question that has haunted explorers for centuries. Is Atlantis the world's greatest myth, or the world's greatest unsolved truth? With the path clear, let us step into the first great case study, the story as Plato himself told it, and how his words have echoed through millennia. When we trace the origins of Atlantis, we always return to one man, Plato. More than 2,300 years ago, in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he described a civilization of astonishing grandeur. His words are precise, almost journalistic in detail. Atlantis, he wrote, was an island empire larger than Libya and Asia combined, situated beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the strait we now know as Gibraltar. At its heart lay a city designed in perfect concentric circles of land and water, with bridges, canals, and gleaming temples that seemed to blend human craft with divine inspiration. Plato claimed this story was no invention of his own, but rather a tale handed down from Egyptian priests to the Athenian statesman Solon, and from Solon to Plato's own relatives. According to the account, Atlantis had risen to dominate much of the known world, a mighty naval power whose influence stretched deep into Europe and Africa. But then, corrupted by wealth and arrogance, Atlantis waged war against Athens and fell out of favor with the gods. In a single day and night, violent earthquakes and floods swallowed the empire, leaving nothing but legend in its wake. For centuries, scholars have debated the meaning of this tale. The orthodox explanation is simple. Atlantis was a philosophical allegory. Plato, after all, was not a historian. He was a thinker concerned with morality and the fate of societies. To many experts, Atlantis was a cautionary parable, a symbolic warning about the dangers of hubris, imperial ambition, and moral decay. In this reading, Atlantis was never meant to be taken literally. And yet, the alternative argument refuses to die. Some suggest that Plato, while moralizing, may have drawn upon real events, memories of disasters preserved in Egyptian records, or even fragments of oral traditions passed down across generations. Could the story of a once great civilization destroyed by catastrophe be a distorted echo of something that truly happened? The eruption of the volcano on Thera, for example, decimated the Minoan civilization centuries earlier, unleashing waves that reshaped the Aegean world. To many, this event sounds eerily similar to Plato's description of Atlantis. But there are problems. Plato set Atlantis in a time 9,000 years before Solon, a date far too ancient for the civilizations we know from archaeology. His level of geographic detail, vast canals, an empire spanning continents, has no match in the historical record. If it were an allegory, the evidence fits. If it were a real memory, the numbers and scale may have been exaggerated or mistranslated. So where does this leave us? Most likely, Plato's Atlantis was a blend. A moral story framed in historical style, perhaps inspired by older tales of floods and fallen empires. Certainty remains low, but the allure is strong. For even if Plato invented Atlantis as a metaphor, he did so with such vivid power that generations after him could not resist searching for the city under the sea, and search they did, turning their eyes not just to Plato's text, but to the earth itself. Which brings us to the next chapter, the geological and archaeological evidence that might reveal whether Atlantis was myth, or whether a true disaster once wiped a civilization from history. If Atlantis truly existed, then surely some trace of it must remain beneath the earth or the sea. For centuries, explorers and scientists have sought those traces, and what they've uncovered are disasters so catastrophic they could have erased entire cultures in a matter of days. One of the strongest candidates is the eruption of Thera, today known as Santorini, around 1600 BCE. This was no ordinary volcanic explosion. It was one of the most violent events in recorded history. The blast tore apart the island, sent colossal waves crashing across the Aegean, and rained ash over distant lands. Archaeologists believe this disaster played a central role in the collapse of the Minoan civilization, one of the most advanced societies of its age. The timing, the sudden destruction, and the image of a great culture swallowed by the sea bear an uncanny resemblance to Plato's description. To many scholars, Thera is the closest we may ever come to finding Atlantis. But Thera is not the only site that has fueled speculation. In the Caribbean, divers discovered the so-called Bimini Road, an underwater formation of massive stone blocks off the coast of the Bahamas. To the human eye, the shapes seem deliberate, like a paved road leading into the ocean. Alternative theorists argue it could be the remnants of Atlantean architecture. Orthodox geologists, however, insist it is a natural formation, the result of limestone fractured by natural processes. The debate remains unresolved, but the mystery endures. Elsewhere, in the Atlantic Ocean itself, rumours of submerged plateaus and ridges, such as the Azores, have inspired theories that remnants of Atlantis might lie hidden under thousands of meters of water. With modern sonar mapping, researchers occasionally detect structures that seem artificial, sparking waves of excitement before experts dismiss them as misreadings of geological patterns. And yet, the hope that something more lies buried persists. Satellite images, too, have entered the discussion. In 2009, Google Earth users claimed to spot grid-like patterns on the ocean floor off the coast of Africa, patterns so precise they looked like the streets of a lost city. Scientists later explained these were artifacts of sonar mapping, not real structures. Still, the story captured headlines worldwide and reignited curiosity about what the deep ocean might yet conceal. Here lies the core tension. For every plausible explanation rooted in geology or archaeology, there is an alternative hypothesis pointing toward Atlantis. The strength of the geological argument is clear. We have evidence of catastrophic eruptions, earthquakes, and floods that could indeed erase a civilization. The weakness is equally obvious. No definitive artifacts, no temples, no inscriptions, no cities have ever been found that can be linked directly to Atlantis. Tentative conclusion, medium certainty. The disasters were real, and they reshaped ancient civilizations. But whether those events were Atlantis itself or simply inspired Plato's tale remains unresolved. And yet even geology is only part of the puzzle. For Atlantis is not just a story of earth and fire, but also of memory and myth. To understand its power, we must turn to the strange maps, ancient records, and shared legends that hint at a forgotten world beneath the waves. If geology provides one layer of evidence for Atlantis, then maps, records, and folklore offer another. One woven from memory, myth, and cartographic puzzles that refuse to fade away. These traces are not ruins in stone, but echoes of something remembered across cultures. One of the most famous artifacts in this discussion is the Piri Reis Map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral. At first glance, it is a typical early world map. But upon closer inspection, scholars notice something peculiar. Parts of the coastline of South America appear alongside what some argue resembles the Antarctic shore, shown centuries before that continent was officially discovered. To enthusiasts, this suggests the map may have drawn upon much older, now lost sources, perhaps records from a civilization advanced in navigation. Could this be a thread leading back to Atlantis? Skeptics counter that the Antarctic coast is simply a distorted drawing of South America, and that the seeming accuracy is exaggerated by imagination. But it isn't just maps. Across the world, cultures preserve flood myths that echo Plato's story of a great land swallowed by the sea. The Sumerians told of a catastrophic deluge in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Hebrew Bible speaks of Noah's Ark and the flood. In India, ancient texts recount the story of Manu, who survived a world-consuming flood guided by a divine fish. Native American legends, from the Aztecs to the Hopi, speak of sunken lands and drowned ancestors. Even Celtic myths whisper of High Brazil, a phantom island in the Atlantic that appears and disappears. Orthodox historians argue that these tales reflect universal human experiences of flooding, which were common in the ancient world. River civilizations in Mesopotamia, India, and China all endured devastating floods, and it's no wonder those memories became embedded in their myths. But alternative thinkers suggest something more, that these widespread legends are not coincidences, but fragments of a shared human memory of a great prehistoric catastrophe, perhaps the sinking of an Atlantis-like land. The evidence here is tantalizing but slippery. Maps like Piri Reis may have drawn from lost knowledge, but they can just as easily be explained as distortions or artistic errors. Flood myths are near universal, but universality does not necessarily prove a single event. What it does reveal, however, is a persistent human fascination with the idea that entire worlds can vanish beneath the water, leaving behind only stories. Tentative conclusion? Low to medium certainty. The parallels across cultures are striking, but without physical artifacts or verifiable records, we tread the line between history and myth. Still, the sheer persistence of these echoes, maps, myths, and legends keeps the possibility of Atlantis alive in the human imagination. But before we are swept away by romance, we must pause and ask, where does evidence end and error begin? By now, Atlantis has taken us on a sweeping journey, from Plato's vivid account to volcanic eruptions, from stone formations to maps and myths. But if we step back, one truth becomes clear. None of this evidence is conclusive. For every tantalizing clue, there are equal, and often stronger, reasons for doubt. Take Plato's dialogues. They are our only primary source for Atlantis, yet nowhere else in Greek history or Egyptian records is the story mentioned. If Atlantis truly existed as a global empire, would we not expect to find more than a single philosopher's tale? Scholars remind us that Plato often used allegories to teach moral lessons, and Atlantis fits seamlessly into his pattern of blending story with philosophy. Then there are the geological candidates, like the eruption of Thera. The parallels to Atlantis are striking, but the timelines don't match Plato's claim of 9,000 years earlier. If anything, this suggests that Plato may have adapted fragments of memory or exaggerated numbers to suit his narrative. The evidence is powerful, but incomplete. And what of the Bimini Road or the Piri Reis Map? Both have sparked sensational headlines, yet both fall short under scrutiny. Geologists explain Bimini's stone blocks as natural formations. Cartographers explain the Antarctic coast on Piri Reis as distorted South America. What seems mysterious often collapses into misinterpretation when tested with rigorous methods. This is where many enthusiasts of Atlantis stumble. Too often, theories rely on mistranslations of ancient languages, misreadings of maps, or exaggerated interpretations of natural formations. In some cases, the mystery of Atlantis has been misused altogether by pseudoscience, conspiracy theories, and even political ideologies seeking to claim a mythical origin for their own purposes. These errors not only weaken the credibility of the Atlantis question, but also risk burying genuine research under waves of speculation. What Atlantis teaches us, then, is the importance of standards. Good evidence is rooted in primary sources, can be tested and reproduced, and is evaluated across multiple disciplines. Without these, we are left with little more than storytelling. And yet, even with these cautions in place, the mystery persists. Why? Because the gaps in the evidence, the silence of history, the vastness of the unexplored ocean floor, still leave room for imagination. And so, as we weigh fact against fiction, we must also ask, what is the true significance of Atlantis, whether it existed or not? Why has this story endured, and what impact does it continue to have on our view of civilization and the future? Even if we never prove Atlantis existed, its story continues to shape how we see ourselves, our past, and our future. The power of Atlantis lies not in the certainty of ruins, but in the questions it forces us to ask. On a philosophical level, Atlantis has always served as a mirror. For Plato, it was a cautionary tale about arrogance and decline. For us, it still speaks to the fragility of civilizations. No matter how advanced or powerful a society may become, nature or human folly can erase it in a heartbeat. In that sense, Atlantis is timeless, an ancient parable that resonates in an age of climate change, rising seas, and fragile global systems. On a scientific level, the search for Atlantis has fueled genuine discoveries. Explorers who scoured the seas for the lost city often stumbled upon real archaeological treasures, sunken ports, forgotten shipwrecks, and submerged settlements. The legend has, in its own way, pushed humanity to explore the ocean depths, driving advances in sonar mapping, underwater robotics, and satellite imaging. Each failed attempt to locate Atlantis has nevertheless expanded our knowledge of Earth's least understood frontier. There is also a cultural significance. Atlantis has inspired countless books, films, and theories, shaping everything from Renaissance exploration to modern popular culture. For some, it embodies hope, the dream that ancient wisdom and technology might one day be rediscovered. For others, it is a warning that pride and greed can topple even the mightiest empire. Looking ahead, the impact of Atlantis divides into two possible scenarios. The optimistic one, that future technologies, deep-sea drones, AI-assisted archaeology, or new geological techniques might uncover evidence of lost civilizations, expanding our understanding of human history far beyond what we know today. The cautionary one, that Atlantis remains a fertile ground for pseudoscience, a myth too easily twisted into false narratives or exploited for sensationalism. Both futures are possible, and both remind us why critical thinking is essential in the pursuit of mystery. Whether real or imagined, Atlantis continues to shape our perception of human potential and vulnerability. It lingers in our minds because it asks the most haunting question of all. What if we are not the first great civilization to rise? And what if we too could vanish into memory? And that brings us finally to the central question, the one that has kept Atlantis alive for over 2 millennia. Is it history or is it legend? Or is... After all the myths, maps, eruptions and arguments, we return to the same haunting question. Was Atlantis ever real? Perhaps it was a moral allegory crafted by Plato to warn against pride. Perhaps it was inspired by real disasters like the fall of the Minoans or memories of great floods. Or perhaps, just perhaps, a part of human history truly has been swallowed by the sea, waiting for the day we uncover it. The truth is that no definitive answer exists, not yet. What we have are fragments, stories passed down through centuries, ruins that spark the imagination, and oceans that remain more mysterious than the surface of the moon. The certainty is low, the evidence elusive, and yet the allure is undeniable. Atlantis endures because it speaks to something deep within us, the fear of loss, the mystery of the unknown, and the hope that beyond the horizon lies something waiting to be rediscovered. And so, the decision is left to you. Do you believe Atlantis was a real civilization, erased by catastrophe, or a timeless parable that grew larger with each retelling? Was Plato a historian of forgotten worlds, or simply the greatest storyteller of them all? Share your thoughts. Debate, question, imagine. Because in the end, the mystery of Atlantis is not just about what lies beneath the ocean. It's about how we, as humans, choose to see our past and our place in the world. If this journey into the deep has sparked your curiosity, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your theory, myth or fact, and join the conversation. After all, the story of Atlantis isn't just Plato's anymore. It belongs to all of us, carried forward by those willing to keep asking, what secrets still wait beneath the waves?